Have you ever felt the magnetic pull of Michael Jackson? Not just as a pop icon, but as the pop messiah who stirred something deep within us? Why do some artists become living mirrors, reflecting our most hidden fears, desires, and shadows? Certain figures carry an unbearable weight, the collective human psyche compressed into a single soul. They become vessels for unconscious projections, lightning rods for our hopes and fears, symbols that transcend mere celebrity to embody archetypal truths buried in the depths of humanity. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Today we uncover how Michael Jackson, the pop messiah, embodied this shadow journey, a living paradox of light and darkness, innocence and pain, transcendence and torment. This isn't celebrity gossip or shallow analysis. This is a deep dive into the human condition, seen through Jung's lens of archetypes and shadow work. What you're about to hear will unsettle your assumptions about fame, identity, and the price of carrying collective dreams. But Jung reminds us, the most profound truths are rarely comfortable. The brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Carl Jung. Onward thinkers, my name is Mr. Halvig, and you're watching The Rational Wise. When Carl Jung explored the depths of the human psyche, he revealed a powerful truth. We don't simply admire our heroes, we unconsciously project onto them the parts of ourselves we repress or deny. Michael Jackson, the pop messiah, was far more than an entertainer. He was a living archetype, a vessel carrying the hopes, fears, and shadows of an entire culture. Pause and consider this. Throughout history, across all civilizations, certain figures emerge who transcend their individual identity. They become symbols that reach beyond conscious thought, tapping into what Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared psychological foundation that links all human beings. Michael Jackson's persona wasn't just a crafted performance, it was a phenomenon of immense psychological magnitude. He bore the weight of millions of projections, becoming a mirror onto which humanity cast its deepest longings for innocence, perfection, transcendence, and redemption. Yet Jung warned of an essential paradox. Every archetype contains its opposite. Every hero carries within them the seeds of their own downfall. The brightest light casts the darkest shadow. When someone embodies such archetypal energy, they do not only gain extraordinary creative power, they inherit the immense psychological burden that comes with representing humanity's most fundamental struggles. What unfolded in Michael Jackson's life was not simply the rise and fall of a superstar, it was a modern passion play performed on the world stage, revealing the heavy cost of archetypal possession. Carl Jung defined the persona as the mask we wear in public, the carefully crafted identity we present to meet social expectations and protect our vulnerable inner self. For most people, this mask is temporary and situational. We wear it at work, at social events, on first dates, and then gratefully take it off in private. But imagine a persona so complete, so demanded by millions worldwide, and so economically necessary that it becomes impossible to shed. Imagine a mask so polished, so perfect, so psychologically consuming that it begins to devour the person behind it. Michael Jackson, the pop messiah, didn't just wear a glittering persona, it was architecturally perfect. Every gesture meticulously choreographed. Every vocal inflection carefully calculated to trigger maximum emotional response. The iconic sequined glove wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a talisman, a ritual object maintaining the archetypal role. The moonwalk wasn't simply a dance move, it was a defiance of natural limits, a demonstration of transcendent power separating the performer from ordinary humanity. This was no ordinary entertainment. It was archetypal perfection incarnate. The world didn't just want music, it demanded transcendence. and Michael Jackson delivered relentlessly, crafting a persona so compelling it became more real than reality itself. Yet Jung warned of the psychological trap hidden in this perfection. When the persona becomes too elaborate, too vital to survival, too fused with our identity, it stops being a tool and turns into a prison. The mask meant to protect suffocates the soul. The performance that promised freedom becomes a cage. Here lies the cruel paradox. The more successful the persona, the harder it becomes to remove. Every album, every concert, every public appearance reinforced the archetypal role until the human being beneath vanished completely. The persona becomes the person. The mask becomes the face. And the authentic self is buried so deeply even the individual can no longer find it. When perfection becomes performance, the soul suffocates in silence. Now we enter Carl Jung's most profound and revolutionary insight, the shadow. This isn't about simple good versus evil, as popular psychology often misrepresents. The shadow is everything within us that contradicts our conscious identity. Everything we reject, deny, or fear. Everything that threatens the fragile image we carefully present to the world. For someone like Michael Jackson, the pop messiah carrying the archetype of pure innocence, divine artistry, and almost otherworldly perfection, the shadow becomes especially complex and heavy. Imagine the psychological equation. If your entire identity, your economic survival, your artistic legacy depend on embodying transcendent purity, then every natural human impulse becomes shadow material. The desire to express anger when wronged, that's shadow. The need to set firm boundaries with those who exploit you, that's shadow. The simple human right to have bad days, to feel moody, to make mistakes, all of it pushed deep into the unconscious because it contradicts the archetypal image. But here is Jung's crucial insight. Shadow material never disappears by repression. Instead, it gains autonomous power in the unconscious. It starts to live a life of its own, fracturing the psyche and tearing a person apart from within. Consider the unbearable psychological weight of being expected to heal the world's pain while never allowed to show your own. Of being worshipped as a divine child while carrying adult burdens that would crush most. Of being demanded to remain eternally innocent in an industry built on exploitation, greed, and corruption. The pop messiah's shadow wasn't filled with evil impulses. It was made of normal human complexity that couldn't be integrated without shattering the archetypal role. The need to be seen as a whole person, not just a symbol. The quiet desire to age naturally without disappointing millions. The simple wish to be loved for who he truly was, not just for what he represented. Jung taught us that psychological health requires shadow integration, acknowledging and consciously accepting these hidden parts of ourselves. But when your shadow threatens not only your self-image, but the hopes and dreams of millions who depend on your archetypal purity, integration becomes not just difficult, but seemingly impossible. The tragedy here isn't that the shadow existed. Shadows are part of every human soul. The tragedy is that the world's overwhelming investment in the archetype made that integration a psychological and economic catastrophe. Carl Jung identified a powerful archetype called the Puer Aeternus, the eternal child. This archetype represents the part of us that resists growing up, that clings desperately to innocence, wonder, and endless possibility. In healthy measure, it fuels creativity, spontaneity, and a sense of magic in life. But when this archetype dominates a person's psyche, when someone becomes trapped in eternal childhood, it creates profound psychological tension and conflict. Michael Jackson, the pop messiah, embodied the Puer Aeternus archetype fully and tragically. His high-pitched voice never fully matured into an adult timbre. His Neverland was more than a physical place. It was a psychological refuge, a sanctuary from a world that seemed determined to corrupt innocence. His insistence on preserving childlike purity wasn't mere escapism, it was archetypal possession. This wasn't pathology in the clinical sense. It was an overwhelming archetypal force taking hold. Jung taught us that when an archetype takes over completely, it can be both a source of extraordinary creative power and devastating psychological fragmentation. The Puer Aeternus gave us breathtaking performances, childlike wonder made flesh, and artistic innovations that seemed to come from beyond this world. But it also posed an impossible dilemma. How does one live as a mature adult when the entire world demands you remain a child forever? Michael Jackson's story forces us to face this painful contradiction. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. The price of carrying the world's innocence is losing your own. Now we reach the heart of Jung's insight about collective psychology. He understood that certain individuals become vessels for what he called archetypal content from the collective unconscious. They don't just carry their own psychological material, they become repositories for the projected hopes, fears, and unintegrated longings of entire cultures. The pop messiah wasn't just an artist, he was a psychological phenomenon of unprecedented scale. Millions of people projected onto this single figure their own unintegrated need for spiritual transcendence, for perfect love, for a savior who could heal the world through pure artistry and innocent intention. Consider the messianic imagery that surrounded this figure, the fedora and glove becoming religious relics, concerts that felt like revival meetings, fans fainting not from mere excitement, but from something approaching mystical experience. This wasn't celebrity worship in any traditional sense. It was archetypal possession on a collective scale. But here's Jung's crucial and uncomfortable insight. When we project our savior complex onto another human being, we commit a double psychological crime. We rob the projected figure of their right to be human, fallible, and complex. And simultaneously, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to do our own inner work, our own spiritual development, our own journey toward wholeness. The pop messiah carried humanity's projection of the wounded healer archetype, the figure who transforms personal pain into universal beauty, who redeems collective suffering through artistic transcendence. But the psychological cost of carrying such massive projections is staggering. Think about the mathematics of this situation. If millions of people are unconsciously demanding that you be their personal savior, their source of transcendence, their proof that innocence can survive in a corrupt world, what happens to your own psychological development? What happens to your own need for growth, for complexity, for the natural human journey toward maturity? You become psychologically frozen in the archetypal role. Every attempt at authentic development gets interpreted as betrayal. Every sign of natural human complexity becomes a crisis for those who need you to remain their perfect symbol. Every messiah, Jung reminds us, must eventually face their own psychological crucifixion, the moment when carrying humanity's projections becomes literally unbearable. Jung's ultimate goal for human psychological development was individuation, the lifelong process of integrating all parts of the psyche into a whole, authentic, and psychologically mature self. This means confronting and embracing the shadow, balancing the persona with true inner identity, and harmonizing our inner archetypal forces. But what happens when the world refuses to allow you to individuate? When your economic survival, your artistic platform, your very purpose depend on maintaining an archetypal role that blocks your psychological wholeness? When any step toward real complexity triggers global disappointment in economic backlash? Michael Jackson's psychological journey was individuation interrupted on a massive scale. Here was a soul desperately trying to become whole while carrying the unbearable weight of collective projections, demanding eternal fragmentation. Every genuine act of self-expression was refracted through the archetypal lens. Every natural sign of human growth was labeled corruption or failure of the messianic ideal. His private battles, chronic insomnia, struggles with pain management, the desperate search for moments of peace away from the archetypal spotlight, weren't character flaws or moral failings. They were natural psychological consequences of bearing archetypal projections too vast for any single human soul to carry. Jung described this process as the dark night of the soul, periods of confusion, despair, and inner dismantling that open the way for true psychological transformation. This descent into the unconscious is not defeat, but a necessary passage to reclaim lost parts of the self. Yet for those trapped under collective projection, this essential darkness is seen by the world as betrayal, weakness, or instability. Instead of empathy, they face harsh judgment. Instead of healing space, they meet relentless pressure to perform. The very process essential to psychological health becomes their undoing in public view. The world demanded Michael Jackson remain psychologically frozen, eternally pure, forever young, endlessly giving. But the human beneath the pop messiah needed to grow, to age, to develop complexity, to fail, to be selfish at times, to disappoint in service of authentic growth. These two demands, the collective's archetypal expectations and the individual's need for development, became fundamentally incompatible, creating a tragic psychological paradox. The price of collective dreams was the sacrifice of personal wholeness. Michael Jackson's unfinished journey toward individuation stands as one of modern psychology's greatest tragedies. It reveals what happens when collective projections grow so powerful they block the very growth they claim to cherish. A solemn reminder of the cost of archetypal possession, not just for the individual, but for the collective psyche as a whole. Some souls are sacrificed on the altar of collective dreams. What does this archetypal journey reveal about us? The observers, the projectors, the collective unconscious that both created and demanded the phenomenon of the pop messiah? Jung would say it reveals everything about our own unintegrated psychological material. Our fascination with Michael Jackson was never truly about him as a person. It reflected our own unexamined archetypal contents, desperately seeking expression. Our hunger for perfect saviors exposes our deep reluctance to do the difficult inner work ourselves. Our demand for eternal innocence reveals our terror of psychological complexity and genuine growth. Our projection of transcendent artistry hides our own untapped creative potential we fear to explore. Michael Jackson became a mirror, showing us both our highest hopes and our darkest psychological shadows. In worshiping archetypal perfection, we revealed a profound fear of embracing our own beautifully flawed humanity. In demanding eternal childhood from our heroes, we exposed our terror of accepting authentic, adult, psychological responsibility. But Jung offers hope alongside this uncomfortable truth. He taught us that recognizing our projections is the crucial first step toward withdrawing them and reclaiming our own psychological power. When we stop forcing others to carry our archetypal burdens, we open the sacred path of integration for ourselves. Michael Jackson's psychological legacy goes far beyond his music, though his artistic contribution remains undeniably transcendent. His deeper legacy lies in what his archetypal journey teaches us about the human condition, the devastating price of psychological projection, and the vital need to allow each other the space to be beautifully, messily, authentically human. Every time we place someone on an archetypal pedestal, we commit psychological violence against both them and ourselves. We rob them of their humanity and deny ourselves the opportunity for true growth. Every time we demand perfection from our heroes, we avoid the hard, necessary work of becoming psychologically whole. Jung reminds us that the goal of human development is not perfection, but wholeness. The pop messiah's unfinished individuation journey challenges and inspires us to commit to the difficult, sacred work of psychological integration, to face our own shadows, to balance our personas with authentic inner truth, and to find our unique path toward wholeness. What archetype do you find yourself projecting onto others? And what might that reveal about your own unfinished journey? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. If this deep dive into archetypes resonated with you, don't miss our next video. 7 signs your powerful aura attracts envy. Carl Jung explains why. You'll find the link and the thumbnail shown at the end screen of this video. Discover how your unconscious energy impacts others and what it reveals about you. Onward, thinkers!